Hello and welcome. My name is JJ, and today I want to talk about card making supplies must-haves. Now, I have to admit I'm pretty new at card making. I've only been doing it for about a year and a half. So actually, that's kind of part of the reason why I want to give my opinion. I want to relay what I think is really important to have, and kind of what you can get maybe later in time or when finances allow it, because this is not an inexpensive hobby. So I'm gonna start with the big stuff right now, and of course I want to talk about a die cutting machine. Now, I do have a Silhouette Cameo, but I really don't use it very often because it does take time to set up the project on your computer, hook it up to my computer, and then set up the mat and everything like that. So I really do prefer to use the die cutting machine, but obviously the versatility that comes with the Silhouette doesn't come with the die cutting machine. Now, I have a Big Shot. Here are my plates. You can see that the bottom one is well used, and I do have a magnetic platform with my Big Shot. Now, I did have to purchase that separately because the platform that does come with the Big Shot is twice as long as this, and is very cumbersome to use, so I usually don't pull it out. I do prefer the magnetic platform. It does help to hold dies in place on top of the paper, so it is pretty much what stays with my Big Shot and is what I use. Now, I am on my second set of plates because I didn't use my plates correctly. I kept switching them around, bottom and top, and you don't want to do that. So I'm not going to get into too much detail about that right now. I just kind of want to say this is what you need if you're going to use die cuts. Now, there are other die cutting machines out there. Feel free to get whichever you want, but this is the only one I've used next to the electronic Silhouette Cameo. Here's that other platform I was talking to you about. Again, I do pull it out once in a while for my embossing folders or to emboss a die, but I rarely use it. Again, it's too big. I need more room on the back end if I am going to use it with my machine, but I rarely pull for it. I do prefer the shorter platform and the magnetic platform. It is my understanding there is a shorter platform with the tabs, but I'm not sure that's something I'm going to purchase just because the magnetic platform is the one I use almost all the time. So maybe in the future, maybe not, but the magnetic platform is definitely the one I recommend. Now, next I want to talk about a craft mat. Now, I have the Tim Holtz glass multimedia mat. I love it. Before I started using this, I had a self-healing cutting mat, and you can see I've cut on this. You could see the marks on there, but it doesn't bother me one bit. I want to be able to do everything on my mat, and I can do everything on this mat. I can put stamp colors down, mix it with water. I write on this mat with a dry erase marker, and it just cleans right off. Glue cleans right off, no problem. You can see here I've put down some color onto my mat, and it just wipes away. And if I want to add water to it, mix it up, do a little watercoloring, I can do that as well. So I really recommend this mat. This is the larger mat. I believe they came out with a small one. Not too interested in that unless I'm going to travel and craft, which is not something I do. So definitely highly recommend this glass mat. I absolutely love it. It was a huge game changer for me. Moving on, I want to talk about a paper trimmer. Now, I have the Tonic Studios Guillotine, and it's supposed to be self-sharpening as well. So far, it's been great. You can see the etched lines for the standard card size of 5.5 by 4 1/4. So, which is nice, right? It takes a lot of the measurements out of it for you. There are a couple of spots on the bottom. I don't know if you can see where I've made my own markings for certain sizes, but I do really love this paper trimmer. It's small, compact, really simple to use. Now there are other trimmers, those sliding trimmers. Don't know what it is about those, but I really don't care for them. Everybody has a different opinion about them. This is one of the sliding trimmers that I have. It also scores. I do pull this out when I have larger paper, like 12 by 12, because that just doesn't fit in the guillotine trimmer that I have. So I do pull this out once in a while, but not very often. I have another sliding trimmer as well that I had before this one, but again, I just don't pull them out. It's really rare, or if you need to cut in the middle of your paper, this works well for that as well. So again, not something I pull for. I definitely prefer the guillotine trimmer. I can't recommend that one enough. Now moving on, we're going to talk about a scoring board. This is the first scoring board I got. This is that Martha Stewart scoring board. I really don't understand how I lived without a scoring board before this, because it's so handy and gives you such nice crisp lines and a nice crisp fold. This one I like because you can make your own envelopes, and you've got all the measurements here for you, so it's pretty simple to follow. But I don't pull this out very often. I have the Score Buddy, which is what I pull out to use. Comes with a little bone folder. I do have a larger separate bone folder. I know, well, it's my understanding, I don't want to say I know, it's my understanding the Teflon bone folders are really great. I am thinking about purchasing one. I've put one or two in my cart a couple of times, but I just haven't bought one quite yet. Now, stamp positioner. To be honest, I don't think I would be doing this if I didn't have a stamp positioner. I don't know what people did before this. Well, I know what they did, but I don't think I would be any good at it. That is for sure. So this is my larger stamp positioner for those larger stamps. You can see made my own wreath builder there, but this is the large one. I don't pull this out too often. Again, it's just for the larger stamps. I do have the smaller one, which is the one I use almost all the time. I've also laminated my own grid paper. I more so for a white backing. I didn't like the black or getting stamping ink on my foam. That just really bothered me. So I made my own. And I really like this positioner because the measurements along the border there are not taped on. That's actually underneath the acrylic or that resin, whatever that is there. But this is definitely my go-to platform. Now I do have another stamping platform. This is the first one I got, and this one is by Stamping Up, and this is the Stamparatus. This one has its uses. You can see you can let the paper hang off the end there. It's got a couple of folding doors, I guess you could call them, folding plates. So if you're doing a large amount of cards with the same design, you can pick these up and turn them over. So there's a lot of room there, especially for layered stamps, to do some bulk card making there. And here you can see that you can hang the paper off the end. I rarely reach for this one. I just don't use it. It's definitely heavier than my other smaller one, and there's just a lot more plates to work with, so it's a little bit more cumbersome. But again, lots of choices out there, but I love to have a positioner. Now I want to talk about adhesives. This is kind of a really big deal. I'm going to start with liquid adhesives because you really want to find a good liquid adhesive that isn't too wet. And when I say too wet, I mean making your paper wet. Now this Tombow Mono multi-purpose glue is my favorite. Now I do transfer it to that little container there just for more precision. You can see the other adhesives I've got here. that multi-medium matte, multi-medium gloss. They're okay, but the Tombow is really my go-to. And here's some tacky glue. I use this for my crepe paper flowers, and I have tried it on paper. It doesn't work very well. It's too wet. It seeps through, that moisture seeps through the paper, and you don't want that when you're card making. Now I have some other mono aqua glue. Again, too wet, seeps through the paper, just too much moisture, so I don't reach for this at all. Now there are other glues on the market. There's this Gina K Connect glue. I find this a little bit expensive, 15 milliliters for $6. My mono glue is 25 milliliters for $5. Now the Nuvo glue I've seen a lot of people use as well. It is something I think I will try because the price point on it isn't too bad. You've got 60 milliliters for $5.99, so not too bad there. So you want to find something that you like. We want to find something that doesn't have too much moisture and isn't going to seep through that paper. And that Tombow mono, it really is my go-to. So find something that works for you that just doesn't hold too much moisture. Now I want to talk about double-sided tape. I use a lot of this crafting. I think it's really important to have in your toolbox. I've got multiple sizes. You could see 1/4 inch here, 1/2 inch. I've got 6 inches here as well. So lots of uses, lots of different things you can do with them. Die cutting. I put my panels on with this double-sided tape. I prefer it over the liquid glue. The liquid glue I use dries pretty quickly. So I have a little process that I do with my double-sided tape. So I go through a lot of this. Now, I've also got some tape runners, but I don't use a tape runner very often. I've got permanent tape runner here, and then I've got a temporary tape runner here. And I do use the temporary tape runner just to hold a couple of my panels together if I need to position stamps or whatever I need to do, so it does come right off. Now I want to talk about foam tape. Now this is really important. It's got multiple uses, adding dimension to your die cuts, adding your panels, shaker cards. Now this was 36 yards. This is Burtec double-sided foam tape. Cost me $22. Now this doesn't tear quite as nicely as the 3M Scotch double-sided foam tape, which I have used, but that'll run me $70. So I guess I'll have to pick up some scissors and cut it instead of tearing it. Now moving on to a ruler or straight edge of some sort. Now I have a few rulers. I make sure mine are the stainless steel rulers just because I like to use a craft knife along them, and I can end up cutting off plastic if I have a plastic ruler. Here you can see a T ruler. This is pretty handy when you're lining up your sentiments on your card. I do find them a little long. Wish they would make them shorter instead of 12 inches, but it works. The next thing I want to talk about is cutting tools. Now, first I'm going to talk about a craft blade. I think these are really important to have. There are little incidences where you need to use them, fix a problem, cut with a ruler. Now, I've got a craft blade and I've got a box cutter. I got the box cutter from the dollar store. The one I reach the most for is the box cutter. I find it sharper, it stays sharper longer. Now when it comes to scissors, I cannot recommend these enough. These are amazing scissors. Rubber grips, very sharp, even though it is a serrated edge, it doesn't feel like it, and non-stick. And that was a really big deal to me, that non-stick, because I have other really, really sharp scissors and kind of expensive scissors. But you'll see on these ones, very sharp, paid a lot of money for these, but you can see all of the adhesive residue. And that just doesn't happen with the tonic scissors. They're amazing. I create crepe paper flowers. I cut a lot of thick paper, and they just cut through it like butter, and they're so comfortable. So I really do recommend these scissors. Can't say enough good things about them. Now tape, simple but necessary. So I've been using masking tape for a long time with my crafting, and I saw these really pretty ones in Staples and I absolutely had to have them. So I use masking tape on my dies and papers to run them through the machines. I use them with stenciling, masking. Now, to get rid of some of the stickiness, if I want to be careful, I just use that tape on my hand a couple of times, and it just adds a little bit of oil to the adhesive and just makes it a little less sticky. Now, I also use this isn't actually Post-it tape, but it's the same idea. I use this for the same thing, masking, stenciling, with my die cuts on paper. It really kind of depends what I'm doing. Now this is actual Post-it removable label. Same idea, masking, holding dies to paper if I need to. Lots of uses. You definitely need something like this in your craft toolbox. This is really important. I reach for both of these depending on what I'm doing. So yeah. It's a simple tool, but it's definitely one I wouldn't be able to craft without. Now I'm going to talk about another simple but important tool, and that is an eraser. So I'm going to talk about 3 different types of erasers. A basic white eraser for pencils, adhesive eraser, and a sand eraser. I'm going to demonstrate the sand eraser as well as the adhesive eraser. So I'm just going to grab a piece of scrap cardstock. I'm going to grab some ink, make a little ink mark on there, and then just take that sand eraser and erase a spot in the middle of it. So here I've got the sand eraser, and I'm just going to erase a spot there just so you can see it. Now this sand eraser isn't going to perform miracles for you, so if you've got a big blotch, it will help. I'm not sure that it's going to fully remove it, but if you've got a little splotch or a little spot, this really does work wonders, and you can see that little spot there where I've removed the ink with the sand eraser. Now next I'm going to show you the adhesive eraser. I absolutely love this adhesive eraser. I reach for this all the time. If you get adhesive coming out from under a die cut of some sort that you've put together, this really helps to remove it. Or I've even smushed glue all over my paper by accident. So I'm just moving the glue around on this scrap piece of cardstock just to help with getting it to dry. Now I'm trying to show you here through the camera, but it's really tough because it's white glue on white, and I should have done it on a darker cardstock, kind of looking back at it now, but I didn't. But I am taking off all of that adhesive. It comes off no problem. It just brushes away like it would eraser pieces. So it does work really, really well. Again, a really simple tool, but definitely needed if you're going to be card making and you don't want to have to start over or have to cover up any mistakes that you make. So I really do recommend basic white eraser, sand eraser, and the adhesive eraser. Now I'm going to talk about a die pick and a pickup tool. So a die pick is basically just a poker, and odds are if you're already die cutting, you have something like this already. Now I don't just use this to poke die cuts. I've poked holes where I've needed to poke holes in my cards. I've even moved glue around in tight areas with that. Now a pickup tool will allow you to pick up sequin, embellishments, even very tiny die cuts, and place them where you need to place them. So this is a handy tool when needed. You can see me demonstrating it here with some sequin. Picks them up really nicely and puts them down. There's lots of different styles of pickup tools out there, kind of whatever suits your mood, you can pick up. Now I have to apologize. I forgot to include tweezers in my initial video, so I recorded again, but the lighting is just absolutely terrible. So apologize about the lighting. So here I've got 3 sets of tweezers. Now they're all a little bit different. The one I've got in my hand here is the more expensive set, and it's definitely more precise, especially when it's closed. It makes perfect contact, as well as it's got a pretty sharp point on the end. Now, you need tweezers when heat embossing, placing your sentiments. There's lots of different reasons to use tweezers, so they're definitely an important tool in your crafting. Now, I want to talk about paper. Paper is really important, and I'm really only going to be talking about card base and the panels. I want to talk about kind of that heavy cardstock. Now, I've got some Neenah Classic Crest here, 110 pound. It's really great cardstock, but the price is a little high. Now, the 110 pound cardstock, the Neenah Classic, is $297 GSM, and the GSM is what you want to look at when looking at a heavier cardstock. Now, what I normally use, which is on the left there, is the Accent cardstock, and that one is only $271 GSM, so it's a little bit less than the Neenah, but for 200 sheets I paid $20 for this cardstock. Now, the Neenah Classic 110, I got on Simon Says stamp, I got 25 sheets for $8.99, and that's US. Okay, so I pay a little bit more, and I think it's about $12 for Canadian. So you can see there's a little bit of a difference in the color. The Accent cardstock on the left is a little bit of a brighter white. Not by much, but a little bit. But the Neenah is actually a little heavier and does fold a little bit better than the Accent. But again, I guess it depends on what you're willing to pay, what your priorities are, on where you want to put your money. But for my card making, I just use the Accent. I have some of the Neenah left. I really use it sparingly, but I don't do a lot of Copic coloring, so that doesn't really apply in when I'm looking for a good cardstock. I don't need to worry about that kind of stuff, and my understanding, the Neenah is better for it. Now I'm going to move on to stamping inks. This has been my biggest struggle, more because of the colors. But I'm going to start by saying you need to get yourself a good black ink. The Ranger ink I've got here on the left, that is an alcohol-based ink. It is not a dye ink. It is an alcohol-based ink, so it does make it waterproof. And then I've got a VersaFine Onyx Black, which is a pigment ink. Now, I do the VersaFine Onyx Black, I think gives me a crisper image, but the Ranger does have its uses as well. Now, if we get into dye inks, and this is probably where my struggle is that there are so many brands, so many colors. What do you choose? Now, when it comes to stamping, the Gina K, the Altenew, Simon Says Stamp, there's lots of really good dye inks out there. Gina K I think is great, the Altenew I think is great. You've got some Distress ink. I'm not sure that'd be great for stamping, but I have stamped with it with no issues in the past. But again, there's just so many colors, and when you're paying, $3 to $5 for one color, it adds up when there's 40 colors you want to get. Anyways, so moving forward, I'm going to talk about pigment inks. Now, these are not the same as dye inks. Dye inks go into the paper and dry right away. Pigment inks sit on top of the paper and take a lot longer to dry. But because pigment inks sit on top of the paper, you can use the white, you can get metallic colors, which isn't something you can get with dye inks. Now, you can also have hybrid inks, which is a hybrid ink is a combination of pigment ink and dye ink. Now, These Distress Oxide inks are my absolute favorite. I love these, and I am actually trying to get every color. I believe I have over 30 colors right now, and I am working on getting the rest of them. Now, I love that I can stamp with these. They do take longer to dry compared to dye inks, but they don't take as long as a pigment ink. I love the way these blend. I love the way these stamp. I love the pastel look to them. So my recommendation, find an ink you like and just stick to it, especially when it comes to stamping. Now I'm going to talk about blenders, and when I'm talking about blenders, I'm talking about blending your inks. There's so much out there. Oh my goodness. I really do like the scrapbook.com domed blenders, as well as the Ranger blending tool. Those are really what I go to. There are lots of other tools out there for blending. I do have some blending brushes, but I rarely reach for those. I do recommend the foam blenders just for good, crisp, and consistent blending. But again, I think everybody's different on the look that they're going for. Stamp mounting blocks. Now, as much as I rant and rave about the positioners, still need stamp mounting blocks. They have their uses. I have some fairly inexpensive ones here. I do use them once in a while, especially if I just need to make a quick stamp on the inside of the card, or a quick sentiment, whatever the case may be. But for the most part, I use the stamp positioners just because I can control exactly where that stamp is going, as well as the amount of pressure being put on that stamp. Now, cleaning supplies. You don't need the fancy stamp cleaning tools. You just don't. I've got baby wipes, use them all the time. I've got Lysol wipes, which are probably more so in short supply lately. I use those once in a while, but for the most part, I just use baby wipes. And you can buy the refills to go in that container as well. I've got some paper towel here. Never know when you'll need it. Use it for some watercoloring for your brushes. Microfiber cloth. Probably the most important part of cleaning is having that microfiber cloth. You're going to need that cloth to clean your stamps. You can see here I've used both of these to clean my stamps or clean up stamp inks. I do have a stamp cleaner pad. It's rock hard right now because it's dry, so you just add water to it and it becomes this foam. But it's really, I never use it. You really just need a microfiber cloth and some wipes. So I'm going to talk about some additional supplies that you may need. If you want to do heat embossing, or you just want to start out heat embossing, my recommendation, get the Versamark, an anti-static tool, and some white embossing powder, as well as you'll need a heat tool and a heat gun, which I don't show on screen here. But I would start out with that, get the hang of it, and then move to more colors if you need to. For the most part, I just use the white. I really don't use many other colors. Other tools I use, I've got some watercolor brushes here. I use these even with stamping ink to add a little bit more ink to a stamp I've already stamped. I just put a brush into the ink and move the color over to the stamp. Then I've just got some pens here. I've got a Sharpie, fine point Sharpie. I use it once in a while, not too often, but once in a while I do reach for it. Another pen I have is a dry erase marker. I use this actually quite a bit because I can mark on my glass mat here. I can mark on stencils with it, and it just wipes away. It's really great. Here's some clear glitter just for embellishments. I use that actually quite a bit as well, and it really does add that extra pop to your cards. And then there's just some gel pens. A white gel pen definitely comes in handy once in a while. I have a few other colors as well. So just a couple of other things that you want to put in your toolbox there. Again, this stuff kind of just came over time. It's not a lot of stuff I purchased right away. Now here I have got Zots. This is by Thermoweb. Those 3D Zots I actually use quite often. For some reason, I use them during Christmas card making. I don't know why. I think it's the snowflakes. I really do. And I've got the zips there, which are just some adhesive strips. So I reach for those once in a while, but for the most part, it's glue and double-sided tape. Then I've got some repositional tacky spray here. Now I've seen a lot of other people use that pixie spray. This is the same idea. I use it on my stencils if I need to. I don't always need to. Again, just another good tool to have. Another thing I recommend too, once you start accumulating a lot of stamps and dies, are these plastic envelopes. These are fantastic. And as you can clearly see, I'm not that organized. But I have been looking into a label maker because I've got so much stuff now that I need to do a better job of organizing my stamps and dies. So I do recommend these plastic bags because they are helpful for me even now, who is still really disorganized. So that's it, guys. My recommendation based on being fairly new to the card making world. Thanks for joining me.